start by approving the minutes from, so we can begin Route 29 North Community Advisory Committee meeting. Do you want to start by approving the minutes from last month?
I think you have to read what's at the top of the agenda.
Okay, this meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. You can participate in this meeting online or phone and call in.
And then we take attendance of members.
Excellent. So we'll take attendance of members. Sue, do you read the names?
I can.
That'd be great.
Okay, let's see. Anthony Pagnucco.
Present.
Okay. David Mitchell.
Present.
Seth Kennard.
Present.
Sharif Taboo.
Present.
Jimmy Dean.
Here.
Brittany Kozich.
Here.
Virginia Newton. Absent. Deborah Van Aersel. Steve Cameron. Sue Friedman present. Did I leave anyone out? Okay.
So to confirm, we do have quorum, so we can continue. All right. So I think the first thing we do is approve our minutes from the April meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make the motion.
Anyone second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone against? All right, the motion carries. Looks like the next thing on our agenda is Gabe, who's going to be talking about the climate action planning in Albemarle County.
I'm so sorry. We also need to approve the March minutes because your secretary was tardy.
All right, we need to approve the March 2022 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the March minutes?
I make a motion.
Thanks, Tony. Any second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I
All
believe
right.
that Bill has joined us.
Oh, thank
via
goodness, because
phone.
this was very stressful. Bill,
Bill,
I'm
can
handing
you
it
unmute
right back
yourself?
to you.
I, for one, think you did a fine job,
Oh,
Mr.
thanks,
Vice
Sue.
Chair.
I
Yes.
appreciate it. It was a good
Great
test of
job.
the water. Tested the waters.
Okay, you start, let's see.
Is Bill here?
Bill, can you unmute yourself?
I'm on my phone. Can you hear me?
We can now, yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay. Did you guys do, sounds like you did the minutes?
Yeah, we're gonna hand it over to you at number 3, which is the Climate Action Planning Committee.
Oh, okay. Well, I will, yeah, let's go ahead and just do that. I was going to, well, let's do the climate action first. Gabe, are you there?
I am. I'm ready to roll.
Okay, go ahead. I have the slide, your slide presentation up on my computer, so you can just go along with it, okay?
Fantastic. Great. Well, before I start up with the screen share, thanks everybody for having me. I'm really glad to be able to chat a little bit with you tonight about the county's climate protection program and current climate action initiatives. I have the opportunity to talk with each of the community advisory committees this month. So I'm kind of making the rounds and having interesting conversations. One last thing before I kind of do my presentation part, I wanted to just ask very briefly from you all, this could be popcorn style if you want to unmute. I'm just kind of curious, like, what's the first thought that comes into your mind at the prospect of having a conversation with county staff person about climate action in Albemarle County? And anything on the table is fine. Maybe you feel really excited. Maybe you feel kind of overwhelmed about the whole thing. Maybe you aren't super interested. It's all fair game. But just kind of wanted to get a sense of, first thought, best thought, what pops into your mind?
What does it mean?
Trees.
Trees, okay.
Net zero.
Net zero.
That's yeah.
What costs are attached to it?
What costs are attached to it?
I wonder how necessary it is, considering this county has done so much more than most communities in this country, and what more can really be done.
Okay, so how necessary
Here
particularly
locally.
in this community?
Yes, right.
Cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Just good to kind of get a sense of what's on your mind with the topic. So I'll dive in, and I've got some slides to share, some information to offer, and then, really interested in your questions, comments, and discussion. So. All right, can you see the full screen of the PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Awesome, great.
Yeah,
Well,
we got it.
very good. So here we are. I'm going to talk about kind of 4 areas of our work with the county with climate action, and hopefully be able to kind of address some of your questions from the beginning, which are all good ones. And then, if I haven't kind of captured it in the presentation, definitely happy to talk further about it at the end. So first off, I just wanted to mention a couple things in terms of framing the discussion. And that's just 3 ideas, which is that climate change is big, and it can sometimes feel overwhelming to folks in terms of the kinds of changes in extreme weather that we're already starting to see in the county and elsewhere in the country and world, and some of them more that will be coming. So it can feel kind of overwhelming. I found, and there's actually a lot of great scientific research from the last few years on just like acknowledging kind of that aspect of things can be really helpful towards moving towards action. And it's not often talked about kind of in the local government or policy spaces, but just, being aware of kind of the emotional reaction that can happen to something so big as climate change is helpful. And then the third thing is that you all, myself, we can all be part of the solution. And I think there's kind of a unique opportunity for folks on these community advisory committees where you're, somewhat in a bit of a kind of community leadership position in that role. So you have agency, and wanted to mention that to you all as we start out. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the county's climate protection program, give you a few updates. And then I wanted to share after that some intersections between climate action and the comprehensive planning process that has started. That was kind of part of the impetus for Rachel and Tori inviting me to talk with the CACs this month, because the comprehensive plan process has just gotten kicked off. And there's a lot of intersections between climate action and comprehensive planning. And then we'll end with a little bit of how folks in the community can be involved and participate. So first off, just a brief kind of update or synopsis of where we've been and kind of where we are now. The county adopted a climate action plan. Board of Supervisors adopted a plan in 2020. And that plan has a number of key themes to it. So it aims to address global climate change, aims to reduce our contribution to climate change. And it also aims to do that in a way that will help benefit our community, particularly along the 4 themes that we have here on the slide, looking at kind of benefiting local health and well-being, the local economy, local environment, and also making sure that the benefits and costs of what we do are kind of equitable and inclusive in the community. The climate action plan guides work towards reducing our greenhouse gas emissions towards 2 targets that the Board of Supervisors set in 2019. There's a target for reducing our emissions by 45% by 2030, and that's 45% from 2008 levels. And then there's one of you mentioned in your kind of call out at the beginning of the call, the phrase net zero. So the board's second target that was set is to achieve zero net emissions by 2050. The plan categorizes the different strategies and actions into kind of 5 different groups that I have shown here for you. And so the overall plan has 135 distinct action areas. Those are kind of subgrouped into 35 different strategies. And then those strategies fall within these 5 areas that you can see here. So the first one is transportation and land use. And we grouped those together because of the kind of intersection between how land use planning can affect the ways and options for people to get around, go about their day traveling in the community, what kinds of ways they can move about, whether it's by car, by bus, bike, pedestrian, or something else. We have a section on building energy use, and that includes both looking at the energy efficiency of our buildings, residential, commercial, and industrial. So things like insulation and appliances, but it also looks at renewable energy generation on the site of buildings. So that could be often we think about rooftop solar energy generation, for example. We have another chapter that looks specifically at renewable energy sourcing at a slightly broader scale. I guess that photo is slightly misleading. It's the one I had in the county of solar panels that's on top of the Crozet Public Library. But the actions in that section are more talking about slightly larger solar utility installations. We have a number of actions that look at sustainable materials management. And so that includes things like recycling and composting, reducing waste. And then we have a group of actions around stewarding our landscapes, natural resources, and agriculture here in the county. One of the areas of work that we've engaged in the last couple of years has been to update our greenhouse gas emission inventory. And greenhouse gas emission inventory is basically a way to keep track of the emissions that we have that we're producing on an annual basis within the geography of Albemarle County. The most recent one that we did is in 2018. There's usually a 2-year lag when certain data becomes available from the state and federal government to be able to calculate the inventory. So we're currently working on the inventory for 2020. And this update for 2018 was important because we hadn't done one since 2008. So this was a way to kind of get more up to speed in terms of understanding where we are. You can see in the pie chart on the right, that's just a slice of the 2018. So in time, that was our 2018 kind of pie of emissions with a number of different areas. Stationary energy generally refers to buildings. And so again, here I've mentioned those targets that the Board of Supervisors set. And a greenhouse gas inventory is our main tool for monitoring progress towards meeting those targets. So that's why it's important for us to continue doing them every couple of years. This is just to show you kind of over time. The county did a number of greenhouse gas inventories in the 2000s, and that's in the orange dots on the left. And then the what's a green dot in 2018 is our most recent inventory. The green dots further to the right are the board's targets. And so it's the green line is dashed because it's kind of an idealized trajectory. We of course don't know exactly what that will be until we're measuring every 2 years and filling in that slope. So that's kind of what brings us up to the present and is the background for the work that the county's climate protection program is currently doing. And our climate program has 2 main areas. The first one on the left is implementing that climate action plan. And by the way, that's a document that you can check out on our website along with other resources connected to our work. So it's publicly available and happy to share that afterwards. So we're looking to implement that plan and working on that now in a number of different areas. One of the big ones is prioritizing the actions that are community oriented. So I should say the plan that we have has actions that relate to reducing emissions across the whole community. And then it also has actions that are kind of specific to local government and schools leading by example and reducing our own emissions through operations. So we're working to kind of score the potential benefit and cost of different actions that are kind of about the whole community, so that we can help prioritize those and move through them in the most strategic way possible. And then we're also working on cleaning up our own house. So we have a number of efforts underway to pass new policies and procedures for local government operations to help us make sure that we're operating in as sustainable a way as possible. The column on the right is climate adaptation and resilience planning. And so you might have heard these terms kind of used in the news or in other places, mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, and they can sound a little bit jargony. But basically, mitigation is working to reduce the impact of the climate crisis by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then adaptation and resilience is based on the understanding that at this point, there's a certain amount of climate change that is already baked in the form of increasingly severe weather events and other kinds of seasonal disruption. And we also need to be able to plan for those changes that are coming, even as we try to reduce the severity of them in the long term. So we're also kicking off a process to create a climate resilience plan so that to build resilience in our community to those kinds of impacts. The first step of that has been to do a vulnerability and risk assessment, which is going to be, should be released. We've received the final report and are just kind of finishing reviewing it, and that should be released in June. And then we'll be kicking off a planning process where we hope to do quite a bit of community engagement and having opportunities for folks in the community to be involved in helping to create that plan where we can address some of the challenges like the ones listed in the bottom of that box. So I thought I would show you very briefly, just need to switch windows here. This is just a little bit of a more detailed map. You probably can't read any of the text right now, and that's fine. I'll zoom in a second. But this is just a more detailed map of those two columns that I was sharing, where we're kind of laying out all the work that's involved with what we're up to, and kind of somewhat loosely tracking our progress here. So these progress bars are not like scientific, but giving us a sense of where we are with some of that work. So what I just talked about was the climate adaptation and resilience planning. And that includes a number of elements like the vulnerability assessment that I spoke about, which is going to help then inform the planning process that we have. One other element of the resilience planning that I wanted to share with you all is that quite a bit of money has become available through the state government from the state's participation in the regional greenhouse gas initiative. And some of that money has been put into a pool called the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. And that's a fund to help localities in Virginia create plans and then also engage in projects to help build resilience for extreme rainfall and flooding events in terms of our geography. Of course, folks who are living more on the coast are going to be looking at projects to help build resilience for sea level rise as well. So we submitted an application for one of the rounds of that process, and we're hoping to hear back in the next month or two whether we receive that application, which will be a great contribution to the overall climate resilience planning work that we're aiming to do. And then just to kind of give you a visual of some of the elements that are involved in implementing the climate action plan, I mentioned the prioritization of the actions in the plan. We're engaging with different staff and community groups to kind of help us think through that process. And if you look at the plan, the actions are all really good, and they speak about important things that we can do as a community. That said, there's room for improvement in terms of making the language of the actions and strategies in the plan smarter. So some of you might be familiar with the acronym SMART, which refers to specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And one of the things that will help us be more strategic in how we implement the climate action plan and prioritize actions is if we can add some of that language, kind of updating our goals and actions to be more specific, measurable, and time-bound. And then here is just a little bit of a visual showing the different elements of the policies and operational procedures that we're working on at the local government level to help make local government operations more sustainable. So just wanted to show that visual. It's been something we've found useful to help track our work. I thought you might find that interesting. So that's a bit of our ongoing work. And now I wanted to turn a little bit to drawing some intersections between climate action in the community and the comprehensive plan update. Briefly, to return to the pie chart of our greenhouse gas emissions, like it says here on the screen, understanding the sources and distribution of those emissions will help us integrate the climate action plan into the comprehensive plan. So you can see here that the largest slice of the pie is transportation emissions. And then the next largest slice is what's called stationary energy or buildings. And if you can bear with the slight color change, this is the same chart, just with a little different colors, but some helpful visual graphics. So transportation kind of being that largest one, buildings being the next largest slice of the pie, gives us some sense of where there's opportunity for emphasis in our local climate action work, where there's opportunity for improvement. So first off, to highlight transportation, the biggest one that you can see here, I wanted to share this graphic that if any of you looked at the growth management background report that Tori and her team prepared as part of the kind of outset of the comprehensive plan update, on one of the pages, they had this graphic, which I thought was really informative. And it shows between 2015 and 2019, kind of the percentage mix of different modes of transportation that folks were using to go about their business in the county. And first off, I'll mention one interesting note caveat. Again, this was 2015 to 2019. About 8.5% people worked from home. So I'm guessing that probably was higher, certainly in 2020, 2021, and probably dropping off from that peak, but maybe will continue to stay somewhat higher than that, given what folks are talking about with the new normal, so to speak. What I really wanted to highlight on this chart, though, is the middle ones, which show pretty low percentages for public transportation, walking and bicycling. And those are important ways for us to reduce our transportation emissions in the county. And it's also really important, you know, if we want to inspire folks, make it possible for folks to be able to walk and bike more or take public transit if they like to, there have to be really strong infrastructure and good opportunities for them to be able to do so. So that kind of leads to a question: how can growth management and land use decisions help make it more possible for folks to choose those modes that are lower emissions or zero emissions, and then increase those percentages? This is not a comprehensive list. It's, you know, not everything under the sun, but I just wanted to kind of offer these different ideas as interesting food for thought and material for our conversation after the presentation. The photo on the right is an example of what's sometimes called a complete street, which just means that there's adequate space for cars, cyclists, and also pedestrians, and that it's a pleasant place for cyclists and pedestrians to be able to move on in addition to cars. So there's some greenery, good bike lanes, and sidewalks. Also, thinking at a larger level around land use, sometimes you'll hear talk about density and mixed use development, as well as affordable housing being really important for helping to increase different types of mobility and create greater access to walking, biking mobility. So if folks are able to, for example, access a market near where they live, rather than necessarily having to get in their car and drive far away to a larger supermarket for food, for example. And so a couple of these are other things that you might have heard talked about in the realm of climate action, as well as comprehensive planning. But that last one, like parking, thinking about where, you know, cars can be given slightly less real estate, so to speak, and infrastructure for some of these other modes can also be given some real estate in the community. So that's a little bit about transportation, not exhaustive again, but just some ideas to throw out there. For buildings, wanted to offer a few others. So a couple of them thinking about electrification, solar energy systems, and adaptively reusing buildings that are already standing rather than necessarily demolishing buildings and building a new one if the one that's there can be adapted and reused well. And some of these are things that are, there's aspects of these that a comprehensive plan can't necessarily address all of them, but there's some ways that in our policy language that goes into the comp plan, the county can be intentional about saying that we really want to see more of these when new developments occur. Hopefully seeing more rooftop solar on buildings, electrical appliances that are more efficient in those structures. Because it's quite small, and for the sake of this conversation, I'm gonna skip waste for tonight, although the county is involved in a lot of really great work around increasing access to recycling and composting. That's an important piece. But I wanted to highlight something that's kind of interesting and not immediately visible by this chart here. So in our inventory, we only included the emissions from livestock in the county. We didn't include looking at kind of other aspects of what is sometimes the full term for this category is agriculture, forestry, and other land use. But there's an important piece of data behind the scenes here, which is that the county has a lot of forests, and those forests are actually helping us a lot. So they are sequestering or drawing down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and pulling it into their roots, converting it into carbon and sugars. And in doing that, they're actually helping us out quite a bit. So thinking about comprehensive planning and growth management, the kinds of decisions that we make in those processes can help us to ensure that our forests stay healthy, continue to grow, that ensure that sequestration can continue through good stewardship, conservation, and perhaps also increase it by adding tree canopy, particularly in parts of the development areas where there's not as much tree canopy. So how you can get involved. First off, I wanted to share a cool resource that a few colleagues and I created over the last several months. Some of you might have heard about the Stream Health Initiative that has been a project through the Community Development Department. And my colleague, Kim Biasioli, has been heading up that project. She initiated this project to create an environmental stewardship hub and looped me in, as well as a couple of other colleagues working on environmental stewardship. And so we created a web resource that's on the county website that you're welcome to check out. And I have it linked in the PowerPoint slides that I think were sent to you. There's a couple aspects of the resource where you can learn more about county programs in pretty accessible, simple language that covers those top 4 that are listed there. And there's links if you want to do a deeper dive and kind of get more into the weeds. We create a way for you to go that pathway. And then we also list different resources to help community members act at home, on your land if you have land, and in the community more generally. So I'm gonna move away one more time and just briefly show you that web page, just to give you a sense of what it looks like. Part of the reason we did this is the county actually has a lot of resources on our website that include like technical educational resources for folks who want to do different type of environmental stewardship at home or on their land. And there's some programs that we have that can connect folks to cost share programs where there's money available either through the county or through the state to help with a project that you might want to do to kind of increase the environmental sustainability and well-being of where you live. But often those resources were buried multiple layers of pages into the county website in spots where it might have been tough to find, certainly not the most user-friendly. And so part of our intention and goal with this environmental stewardship hub is to create something that's more easily accessed. And all you have to do is, if you go to the county's homepage, click, hover over the community tab, and under learn more about is the link to that webpage. So these are the 4 tiles if you want to learn more about these programs. And then you can click on any one of these sliders at the bottom, the at home, in your community, or on your land. And just to give you an example, if you click on one of those, there's a whole list of different actions, and we classify them by the different areas that they contribute to. So something like shrinking your lawn and maybe replacing some of the turf grass with native plants or native shrubs, for example, we tagged that one with biodiversity, climate action, and clean water because it helps those different aspects. Maybe doesn't have so much to do with reducing waste. But definitely would encourage folks, if you're interested, to browse this website and maybe bookmark it as a potential resource when you're thinking about how you might like to get involved in environmental action and stewardship in our community. And the only 2 other things that I wanted to mention as part of the presentation are just a reminder of what I said a little bit ago. We have this climate resilience planning process that's coming up. And we'd really like to have broad engagement of folks in the community to help us create a good plan that will help us build resilience. So that to be published climate risk and vulnerability assessment, please have a look at it when it comes out. And then also look out for opportunities to participate in the planning process. If you sign up for the county's newsletter on the website, which is also under that community tab, there's a number of different sub lists that you can track interest in. So if you are interested in this, you're welcome to check the list item that I think says environmental stewardship, and then you'll get some of the emails that are specific to those topics. Lastly, I wanted to do a plug for my colleagues, Tori, Rachel, and the folks in community development that have kicked off the comprehensive plan update process. So these links are also in the PDF that I sent, but definitely check out the AC44 website to learn about ways that you can get involved in that process and to be able to kind of follow the work that they're doing as it goes. So that's all that I wanted to share, and I'll stop the screen share, but if you want to reference something visually, I'm happy to bring it back up at any point. So thanks so much for letting me share a little bit about that. And yeah, happy to have conversation. I tried to capture a few of the kind of questions and ideas that you brought up at the beginning, but I don't think I captured all of them. So really happy to kind of talk further about some of that if you feel like something you asked or brought up wasn't covered.
So Gabe, you had a chart that showed that the county has made some progress in reducing emissions. What area or what areas have led in that reduction?
Great question. So that was that chart over time showing our inventories from the 2000s, and then kind of that idealized dotted line going forward.
No, but there has been some real reduction.
Yes, there has. So from 2008 to 2018, we saw about, over the course of that decade, about 10% reduction in emissions. And then there was a little elbow at 2018, and the dotted line gets steeper. So I'll just say that you know, we need to increase the steepness of the downward slope, but it is helpful that we are at least have been moving in the right direction. And we attribute that downward movement from 2008 to 2018 to a couple of different causes or a couple of different factors. One of them is that fuel economy standards for cars and trucks have been getting somewhat better over the past couple of decades. And so we actually saw an increase in vehicle trips. It's measured in vehicle miles traveled in a given year. We saw an increase in vehicle miles traveled from 2008 to 2018, but a slight reduction in the emissions. And that's largely thanks to you know, increasingly efficient kind of miles per gallon for vehicles. So that's helpful. That's a good thing. And then the second one where we saw quite a bit of reduction, or some reduction, I should say, was in the building sector, that one that's called stationary energy. And that is probably due to a couple of factors. One of them is increasing adoption of more fuel efficient furnaces, some electrification that's been going on in the county where folks switch altogether from like a gas powered furnace to an electric heat pump. Those tend to be more energy efficient, even when they're pulling electricity off of the grid. And then the other big reason there is from 2008 to 2018, the share of the different fuels that contribute to creating electricity for our regional grid, there was a pretty big change where a large fraction of fuel used for electricity generation in 2008 was coal, and natural gas had supplanted that coal almost entirely by 2018. So natural gas, certainly still being a fossil fuel, there are emissions associated with it, but it does burn more efficiently and produce fewer greenhouse gas emissions than coal tends to. So that's one of the other reasons that can help explain that change.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'm on again. We can use the raised hand. Seth has raised his hand. Carolyn,
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I had a quick question, Gabe. I thought it was a great presentation. My question is, a lot of the suggestions given, it seemed to me were very residential and citizen-based, and kind of, I guess my question is, what's the incentive as we look at the developments, especially in North 29, that we're seeing put into place where, obviously tree canopies were largely stripped to build these developments, and solar incentives in Virginia aren't exactly the strongest in the country. So what are the incentives for the developers and for the homeowners to get on top of this? Because it seems like a lot of this is voluntary, and we're seeing some massive development in the area that this group provides information for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I can give probably a somewhat of an answer, and it won't be totally complete, but there's a couple things that come to mind. One is that the county is currently working on, as you mentioned, solar. We're working on improving our overall kind of policy language for the comprehensive plan, as well as for the county code, to speak to large scale solar installations to help us clean the electric grid, and also do it in a way that doesn't have kind of adverse local environmental consequences in terms of, cutting down trees, for example, to build solar installations. We'd like to discourage that if at all possible. But we're working on policy language basically to say, hey, we support solar here, and we'd like to see it done in this way that can also benefit the local natural environment. So that's one thing. And then in terms of developers and residents, we're looking at ways where we can incentivize, give different kind of carrots and incentives for developers to hopefully, when they do build, include, if possible, rooftop solar, include features of the buildings that can be more energy efficient. And then we also want to look at different ways that we can get developers to, like you said, cut down fewer trees when building a development, kind of lower impact development, and then also replace some of that canopy that's lost, and ideally maybe replace more of the canopy that's lost if they have to cut down trees than is currently happening. And so that's one of the main areas of work that we're doing right now, to look at, well, where are the levers, kind of strings that we can pull in terms of policy making and incentives. There's some legislation that may be helpful from the state around localities being able to set some standards with respect to either retaining tree cover or replacing tree cover that's been taken out. So that's some potentially good news. And then there's also some of the ways that we can look at it are kind of carrots around density. So if there's a developer who owns land where they can do development by right on that land, which is often the case, as I'm sure all of you are familiar with, if there's by right development and the developer wants to kind of, or the owner wants to do something with it regardless, sometimes if we can say, well, we'll allow you to do a little bit more density, then we can ask for some things in exchange, like those energy efficiency improvements, or like including a little bit more affordable housing, maybe asking for, some kind of more environmental and carbon thinking in terms of the landscaping around that. So hopefully that speaks to some aspects of the question. I'm sure there's more that we could go into, but those are a few of the areas we're looking at.
No, thanks. I'm sure David has questions based on
David?
that. Thank you.
Go ahead, David. Unmute, David. Unmute.
my space bar function went away, so I couldn't just
Okay.
whack it and start. I had to find the actual button.
Okay.
So, full disclosure for everybody listening, I'm one of those developers, so I just got a few things to say. I got a question. First of all, the data. The first, Tony asked a couple of questions that I was asking about the data and how it came down. I'm glad he answered those questions about how the CO2 emissions had dropped in that 10-year period, and then how you quantified the traffic in particular. And I just want to touch on that when it comes to the comp plan and density and how this county, I'm going to say had a plan, doesn't always follow the plan for the comp plan and the densities and all of that. The more, am I correct in saying that your emissions for cars is based on mileage on the county roads, not cars registered in the county or citizens that own a car and this is how much they drive? Like you get traffic counts from VDOT and then,
Yep.
Okay. So there are a lot of cars, especially on 29, that drive through this county that are people who don't live in this county, but they got to work here, and if they could afford to live here, they probably would rather drive less miles, and for all of the various reasons, and that's probably, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, saving the planet is not the top of the list. It's how much does it cost me to put gas in my car? And so, I mean, there are things that we need to keep in mind when we try to balance things like density and tree cover and all of these things and streets, for instance, the smart streets or the complete streets. They're beautiful. They take up extra right of way. And when they take up extra right of way, you're not getting a tree to grow on a piece of asphalt or a piece of sidewalk. But you've got to understand, you're taking up more right of way. You're taking up more of that developable land. You've got to compensate with density in order to reach these goals that we're all talking about. I'm not saying the whole answer is, New York City density. That's ridiculous. That wouldn't even work financially here anyway. But we've got to accept the fact that there are trade-offs for these things. So that's my speech. And you answered my two questions, and I want to make sure I wrote all my notes down before I let myself go here. Oh, one other thing, I learned this. I should have learned it in college, but I didn't. New trees sequester more CO2 than old trees. So if you whack down a big old forest and you're like, oh my goodness, I've killed all these trees. If you plant them back, the new trees are much more efficient per acre because they're going through the growth spurt. I mean, you get to a topped out tree and it's done. It's not creating any more mass. And it's, you can look at a tree on its growth rings and they get tighter and tighter as they get older and older. That equates to CO2. So it's not the end of the world to clear development, build these houses, efficient houses that are dense so that people will be closer to their jobs and their shopping and all of these other things. It's not a complete loss because when you plant back the trees, and from somebody who is paying a lot of money for a lot of trees at North Point right now, we got a lot of trees and they're all brand new and they're all going to grow really, really fast. So anyway, that's all I got. And by the way, I totally agree. I don't think we ought to go California style on rooftop units. I mean, solar panels, but the HOAs can no longer prevent people from putting solar panels on their roofs, which is great. And, for whatever it's worth, the buildings we have on the drawing boards right now, from a commercial standpoint, all have plans for solar panel. And it's for lots of reasons, but the main reason is saves us money on energy. And frankly, the cost of electricity is not going down anytime soon or ever.
Okay. Anybody else with questions? Okay. Gabe, I had a question on the progress report on slide 9. I guess I'm a little like the last numbers we have are 2018. Is there any way we can or any way that you see that we're going to get the data a little quicker? Because I mean, it's 2022 and we're working with 2018 figures. You know, so it's like one of the questions I was going to ask you, well, how have we been doing since 2018? But you don't have the data for that, right? So,
Yeah,
it seems like a long time before, you know, to get the data. So is there any plans to improve that?
well, we're working on the inventory for 2020 and plan to release that this year. So yeah, absolutely. You know, we'd like to, definitely don't want to be working with 4-year-old data, but plan to have the inventory for 2020 available this year. And the climate action plan commits us to doing a biennial inventory, so every 2 years going forward, to help with that tracking. There's a certain kind of restriction just built in the fact that there are some data sets from the state and also kind of calculation factors that the federal government provides that help us do the calculations to have as close to an accurate estimate as we can. And some of those don't come out until 2 years after the calendar year that's in question, because it takes them time to do the research to develop and check their methodology. So there will always be I mean, I shouldn't say always, maybe in a few years they'll get faster, but we expect there to be a 2-year delay for when we release an inventory. And then the reason that we decided to commit to doing inventories every 2 years rather than every year is just because there's a lot of work goes into doing all of those calculations and producing the report. And we want to make sure we're doing that monitoring evaluation, right? But we also don't want to take away from the work itself.
I am recalling a conversation I had with I don't know if it was B or one of the other supervisors regarding the bike path on the Rivanna River. And the conversation was that it couldn't be completed because some or one of the property owners didn't want the bike path to go through their property. And the county was reluctant to try to exercise any sort of eminent domain to get that bike path done. And I'm wondering if there's been any change in policy on that to try and improve the the use of people cycling to work. I mean, obviously, you can work your way down 29 and cycle into work in Charlottesville, but it's not a very pleasant ride. So I don't know if you're aware of any changes in the policy or the attitude of the county to try and get that bike path completed.
I'm not specifically aware of that exact project or kind of the complications there with the different property owners. I mean, I know that Parks and Rec definitely try, and transportation planners try to, get easements when they can from folks to make those paths. And I've definitely had firsthand experience of being on a bike and running into the 250 or 29 and realizing I would be crazy to try to cross that road.
Right.
So that definitely something that is on my mind, that infrastructure, but I don't know the specifics of that particular project. I don't know, Tori, if that's something that you're aware of. I know that some of our colleagues are probably working on it.
Tori?
I'm not aware of that project specifically.
Okay, I'll try. Maybe we can just try and follow up on that and find out where that is, because it would seem to me like, if you want more people to cycle, then you need more cycling paths. And I'm trying to think. With regard to resilience, okay. One of the issues that especially older neighborhoods have with more rainfall and everything else is storm sewer and poor drainage. Yeah, basically a lot of the drainage plans and a lot of developments weren't really developed, before we had this or became aware of this issue in terms of additional rainfall. I'm wondering if the county has any plans to provide some sort of assistance to the local communities that may be dealing with these issues, of inadequate storm sewers or drainage issues that have come up in the past couple of years that maybe weren't present back in 2010 or 2015. Often the county say, well, that's the responsibility of the community, and the communities really often don't have the resources to deal with these kinds of things.
Right. That's the hope, is that we can do something, that we can, start to help in those kinds of situations. The avenue that we would be looking to is so the grant application that we submitted to the state, the state program around flood preparedness has a few different tracks. And one of them is like a project track. And then one of them is a planning and capacity building track. And they say that they want you to have an adopted state certified resilience plan before they will give you project money, because they want to make sure you're spending their project money in the best ways possible. So the grant we applied for was the planning grant to help us produce the plan with specific actionable projects. And hopefully that'll open up continued money in the future to apply for those kinds of projects you're talking about.
Okay. And these aren't really questions about your presentation, but just some things, food for thought in terms of the county. I think it's actually one county in Virginia, but several counties are where they have landfills. Traditionally, once the hill has been completed, they cover it with soil and then they plant grass. And there are several counties in the country that are, instead of planting grass, doing more like wildflowers and natural, native plants that one kind of help with pollination, but also you don't have to mow it. So, the problem with grass is, not only does it not add any real environmental value, but, you're now running gasoline lawnmowers over it every couple of months. So that's something the county might consider. And this sounds a little far-fetched, but there are also some jurisdictions in the country that are encouraging people, and as far as the government is concerned, to not mow their lawns until June. It's a kind of a no mow May program. Basically, let the wildflowers and dandelions grow and feed the bees, and then before you start cutting the grass. Not like that. And the other question I have with regard to the use of natural gas, does the county have, or are you considering at all limiting the number of new homes that are having gas delivered to them? There are jurisdictions that basically a new home has to be all electric.
Yeah.
And the other thing would be even propane. Is there any plans to discourage the use of propane as a fuel and natural gas?
Good questions. I will try to be brief because I know, David, you've also had your hand up. So just a couple things. Bill, your suggestions in the first part, really great ones around like wildflower meadows instead of turf grass. I know that believe there's a project that passed community development around a solar utility or solar facility on top of one of the landfills in the county. And there's also been some cool work on different solar facilities around the country that have also put native plants, shrubs, instead of turf grass in between the panels. So those kinds of ideas are certainly in the mix and really good ones. In terms of the natural gas and electrification, I don't know in terms of like what kind of legislative authority the county would have, or if the board would want to exercise that if they did have it. We certainly want to encourage and incentivize as much electrification as possible. So one of the programs that we have, one of our partner organizations, the Local Energy Alliance program, does some work in the community. They've been focused on helping lower income households to be able to better insulate their homes, but also electrify equipment so that they're just on the electric grid, which we expect to get cleaner over time, which I think is one of the elements of kind of within what you're saying. So that's certainly a movement that we want to encourage as much as we can and look at different opportunities to do so.
Okay, David?
Hey, just a side note on the gas thing. I think the city of Charlottesville Gas Company is doing a good job of not expanding their service because they were so difficult to deal with at North Point. We just were like, we're not going down this road. I mean, it was just frustrating.
Yeah.
So we passed on it, and the builders were like, fine, we don't really want gas anyway. So I got a question, Gabe, that after Bill brought something about the bike, and I understand that the bike lobby in this community is robust and vocal, but what is the bang for your buck on bus transportation versus bike transportation versus walking? I mean, how many people are riding on a bike in this? This is not California where it's sunny 99.9% of the time, 76 degrees, and you have to take things to work. So has the county, is there a metric? Is there a, I mean, when we talk about what we're going to spend our money on and get right away for and ask developers to build, has anybody looked at this question I just asked?
Yeah, that's a great question.
What's the answer?
So what's the answer? The current answer is that one of my colleagues and I are trying to be able to get some better metrics to answer that question. So we're using some online software that helps, where we can put in different goals that we have within the climate action plan, and also some of the more specific actions, and kind of test out, make estimates of what that bang for the buck, so to speak, is, where the largest kind of benefit in the cost benefit analysis will come from. So I can't give metrics right now, but that's something that we're definitely aware of and wanting to understand, yeah, where we can most wisely put our resources.
Okay, and then my other question is, we're talking about all of these impacts and these carrots and these sticks, and I mean, some people have even thrown out requirements or regulations of forcing not just developers, but private homeowners to do certain things. Who's looking at what those impacts are? I mean, this is already an expensive community to live in. There is nothing that we do that doesn't add some cost to the cost of living here. Is the county looking at the impacts of this?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great point. So in the framework that I mentioned, where we're scoring actions by different criteria to help us assess what's the most strategic way to press forward and prioritize with what we're supposed to be doing in the plan. We have a number of ones looking at kind of scoring for local economic impacts. I mentioned local health and well-being, but also looking at equity and the kind of impacts across different income levels in the community, different geographic areas, to try to make sure, like, hey, we don't want to do something that then ends up having adverse consequences. And so every intention is to try to minimize that. Intentions are great, but that's part of the effort of creating this different scoring matrix to help us be more strategic and precise with how we can go about doing those things, or implementing aspects of the plan. And then the other kind of piece of your question, I'll just say that there's maybe half a dozen verbs that if you read through the tables of the action language in the climate action plan, you'll see like 6 different verbs. And some of them are educate.
I'm an engineer.
What's that?
You need to be careful now. I'm an engineer. I failed miserably in English.
It's all right. They're relatively straightforward ones.
You'd be surprised.
So we have language like promote, encourage, educate. So trying to find ways to, like, if folks are unaware of things maybe that they can do that don't require much to do them, certainly we want to provide that information. Or if someone is kind of already motivated but they don't quite know how, connect them to things that they can do. We also have incentivize in there, which we've talked a little bit about tonight, looking for ways where we can best incentivize action. And then we have some language around like update update policy language in the comprehensive plan to help guide community development, or the I know that the zoning ordinance, for example, is going to be under review this year for update. And so we have some actions in the plan around assess whether some language in the zoning ordinance might be able to be updated to kind of better help move things in the direction to advance the climate action plan. So that kind of suite of actions are the different types of, I guess, tools in our tool belt, so to speak. But definitely we're looking carefully about what we want is that anything we do that helps advance climate action should also bring more benefit to the community, as opposed to creating like a zero-sum game where we're causing folks or causing communities harm through what we're doing. That's certainly something that we'll be doing everything we can to stay away from.
So
Great, yeah.
just
Go ahead,
to,
Dave.
real quick, just to, so everybody that's listening here and understands, it is, I think the most important document in the county is the zoning ordinance and not the comprehensive plan and not a bunch of these other studies. The zoning ordinance often can have a verb or two changed, and the entire meaning of a section can be 180 degrees the other way. And I'll just encourage anybody who's, the comprehensive plan is very sexy to pay attention to because it's got pretty pictures and drawings and all that stuff. But the zoning text is frankly the most important document in the county. So for whatever that's worth, if y'all want to pay attention to something, pay attention to that.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say, David, that's a very good point about, what might seem like a good requirement to put on a developer, to make their housing more efficient. Also, it makes it more expensive. So if that drives people out of the county and then they're driving in the county, so it can be counterproductive, so we have to be careful about that. I appreciate that point. Anything else on the climate action plan?
Can I jump in on that point briefly? Sure. One of the actions that we're looking at is the CPACE funding that's been enabled by the state, which can be a way, not necessarily in all cases, but can be a way to help finance some of those kinds of improvements, but then not put the developer in a position where the housing becomes, they have to make the housing like less affordable or charge more to make their money back. So that's one kind of action or tactic that we have in the plan and is something that we're looking into.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, going once on climate action. Okay. One of the things I did want to talk about, and Sue brought up, was the recent issue that the county has had with one of the CACs, and it seems like the roles of the CACs may be changing. The planning staff is understandably taxed with developing the new comprehensive plan, and so they're changing how we're meeting and how often we deal with these things. And I know Sue definitely asked about it. So Sue, did you have any comments on it?
I just was interested, as you know, I missed the March meeting. And so I was doing the March minutes and I saw the schematic of the new topics and the new meeting schedule for our CAC, and I assume all of them through the end of the year. And then, to see the recent news with the Rivanna Village CAC, or the villages at Rivanna, or whatever their official name is. I didn't know if there was a connection between those two. Did that group feel like that they were no longer having the community input that they needed or deserved because of the scheduling change, or was it something else? I was just curious about that. And I don't know if Carolyn or maybe B have any insight into that.
I'm going to ask B about it next week. She's dealing with a health issue, so I'm going to give her a couple days off, so to speak.
Okay.
But I'll check back with her next week. I know it was basically kind of a dispute about the county supervisors, and I don't know how much the planning staff was involved, but we're unhappy with the Rivanna Village CAC pursuing comments on, I guess, something that they thought had already been decided. I'm not sure. And so I've got a couple ideas, and I did happen to talk to Rachel Falkenstein on Tuesday, and I suggested that maybe some mediation might be appropriate. And the other thing maybe is see if we could generate up a meeting between the CAC chairs and the supervisors, or Donna Price, either one. The other thing, you know, that in regard to the CAC meetings, I mean, the county's still required to have public meetings about these zoning modifications, and they're using the CACs as the avenue to do that. So, and these the ZMAs, you know, that developers submit, they're not going to stop because the comprehensive plan is being redone, you know. So, you know, there's still a need to review those, and, you know, so I don't know how this affects how the county planning staff can deal with that or not. You know, it's like county can't tell the developers, well, you can't submit anything because we're working on a new comprehensive plan. I mean, I think I'm correct on that, right, David?
Well, yeah, no, you can't. But before these CACs were created, there were just public meetings that were scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
The CACs, so if y'all know, I've been on the one in Crozet because I live out here. But I think it was a matter of like the military mission creep, where the CACs were not initially, we're not elected. We don't vote and approve anything. We are here to take comments from the public and give our opinions and have a forum for a conversation. And I think that there's been mission creep. It existed in Crozet. I mean, Crozet is I would say Crozet and Rivanna are very similar from a, I don't know, political might be the wrong word, but just from a belief standpoint. I mean, it's those two places there's no question about the geographic boundaries of those two areas. And you can certainly have questions about the geographic boundaries all up and down 29 and not, right? So I think there was a lot more ownership that they felt they deserved or needed or required. I'm totally speculating here. And I just think it was mission creep. And I think the supervisors, I mean, I don't have to think it. You've seen the quotes from some of them. They just felt that there was just an overstepping of authority.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate, Bill, that we give our supervisor some time to address this later. But given that we have 11 members now, and an awful lot of these great folks are new, I didn't want people to feel like they'd signed on to something that was no longer valuable or that was somehow contentious. And so I think it just would be very good if she spent shared a few words with us at the next meeting.
I think, honestly, Sue, the best thing about this group, and Crozet had the same thing, there was a wide diversity of people on the CACs in Crozet and here now. Everybody is represented. And that, I think that helps prevent having the issues that some other CACs have had. How about that?
Yeah. I mean,
we all don't have to agree with each other, and we're not gonna, but it's important that everybody gets their words out of their mouths.
I just don't like to see these things come to the point where, everybody resigns, or, that it seems like it's a little extreme.
You don't want to go third grade, take your ball and go home?
No. Okay, so
every day.
Yeah, I had enough of that during the workday. So David, we're
Yeah.
good. We're good.
Yeah, don't run down those third graders. Anyway, I'll talk with Tori. Tori, you're still going to be with us for next month or two or whatever.
I think David Benish will be back.
Oh,
for
you think
next
David will be back?
meeting, but since
Okay.
he was out of the office this week, I just briefly took his place.
Okay. I didn't know if he was coming back or not, Anyway, I'm thinking for next meeting, I don't know what we'll have in the way of the things to look at, but what I'd like to get, and I'll talk to David about it, is maybe an update on the progress and status of all of the different zoning change amendments and deviance zoning. What do we call that with the school? They wanted an exception or something. But anyway, if we could get an update on everything that we've looked at in the past, say 6 months or so, just where is it now? What is it ready to go to the planning commission? I know some of them have been withdrawn, so it'd be good to get an update on everything that we've looked at. The North Fork and RST. What's the progress there? I mean, we've seen that they've evidently the motel and the trailer park have been closed. So what and when can we expect the building on that, and where are they in the architectural review process? So that sort of thing.
I agree, Bill, and including the new developments around the Hollywood Town Center and even Brook Hill, because they're kind of shifting some of the things that are happening inside. I mean, are we still going to get an ice skating rink? I think it would be good to get an update on Brook Hill too.
Okay, great.
Sure. I can follow up with David on that. We can look at what's currently under review, both for rezonings and then for rezonings that have been approved, where the site plans are at, if they've been submitted. We can look at the certificate of occupancies to see how many units have been built within approved developments as well. So we can put that together.
Great. I really appreciate that. So it is 7:54. Let me tell you when our next meeting is scheduled. My calendar. Okay. It's probably June 9th, 6:30. So if no objections, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
Okay,
Great.
Okay. Good night, all. Thank you all for coming.
Good night.
Got a lot of good.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.